More than any other game in the series, Pikmin 3 revolves around its captains, which there are 3 of: Alf, Brittany, and Charlie. To beat the game, you need to utilize all 3 of them. There are specific puzzles in the game that require all 3 captains to complete. And these aren't just puzzles to get fruits, these are puzzles to progress the main story. So, what if we took it away? What if we took away the ability to swap captains? What if we forced ourselves to play the game like Pikmin 1, where Olimar was our only option? Would it still even be possible to beat the game? Could you beat Pikmin 3 with only 1 captain? Well, come with me now and find out. Since you can't actually beat the game without saving Brittany and Charlie, we can't technically beat the game with only 1 captain. But we can do the next best thing. At no point during this run can we swap to a different captain. So if we start off the day as Alf, for example, we have to end the day playing as Alf. And at no point can we swap to Brittany or Charlie to do anything. The only exception to this is when the game makes the swap for us. For example, when you save Charlie from the Fozbat, you will be put in control of him as soon as the cutscene ends, no matter who you're playing as. And I think this is fair because it doesn't really help us in any way, and I literally have no control over it. So without further ado, let's hop in. So both tutorial sections can obviously be completed with only 1 captain. That's literally how they're supposed to be played. So I'll be skipping over both of them. However, things get a little more interesting on day 2. We can build this bridge, break down this wall, and find rock Pikmin all just with Elf. As soon as we do though, we come across Brittany, who we have to save with our newly acquired rock boys. Once Brittany is set free, the game makes us play through this tutorial, which is literally supposed to show us how to swap captains. And obviously we can't do that. The game wants us to throw Brittany and some Pikmin onto this brick, swap to Brittany, and then get the lemon. But thankfully, we don't have to do that. We can just throw Brittany, whistle her, and then just walk away. It's weird that the game lets us do this because every other tutorial in the game forces you to complete it before you have to move again. But thankfully this one doesn't, and we don't just fail the challenge right away. But don't get comfortable, because we have another obstacle right after. Now that we have our rock Pikmin and Brittany, the game wants us to come over here and build this bridge. Unfortunately for us, all the bridge pieces are on the other side of the river. What the game wants us to do is throw Brittany and some Pikmin onto the opposite bank, swap to Brittany, then build the bridge from the other side. But since we can't do that, we have to find a way to build a bridge from this side of the river. At first, I tried throwing my Pikmin across and then charging them at the bridge pieces, which worked for the ones that were trapped in this crystal formation, but for the ones that were located further away, it didn't. No matter what I did, I couldn't actually lock onto the pile, so I couldn't charge my Pikmin at it. I'm not sure if this is because they were too far away, but either way, it just didn't work. And at this point, I thought we already would have to use our first swap of the run. But then I found this trick. If we walk straight into this corner at a very specific angle, we can clip through the geometry and fall right out of bounds. And thankfully, it's not too hard to do. You just have to keep trying different angles on the joystick until you notice Alf changing from this type of movement to this one. Once he starts doing this movement, you just hold the joystick in place and he'll clip through the wall. And like I said before, once you clip through the wall, you will fall out of bounds, which will respawn you on the other side of the river. Which means we can just grab our Pikmin and finish building the bridge, all without using a single swap. The next day, we come back and fight the Armored Maw-Dad, and honestly, there's not a lot to talk about in this fight. Not being able to change captains doesn't really affect it in any meaningful way. We do, however, do this pretty cool strat, where you break all the armor on his tail and then charge all your Pikmin on him, which ends up dealing a shit ton of damage. But other than that, it's basically a regular fight. We beat him, collect the Data Glutton, and move on to the next area, the distant tundra. And the distant tundra is where things are gonna get spicy. This area caused me massive issues during my rock-only run, and it was mostly because of this massive bridge. Normally, you're supposed to explore the distant tundra with Alf and Brittany looking for pieces to build this massive 2-section bridge. The problem is, you have to swap between both of them to explore the entirety of the distant tundra, because Alf and Brittany are kept separated by this river. There are bridge pieces on both sides of the river, so you need to use Alf and Brittany to collect them all. And the only way to reunite them is by building this bridge. Until the bridge is built, you can't go on Alf's side with Brittany, and you can't go on Brittany's side with Alf. So, we have a major problem. But, luckily for us, there's a very complicated and in-depth trick that can help us get around this. We first have to start off by escaping the cave with Brittany. Once we're out, we throw our yellow Pikmin across the river and then make our way over to the area with the upside down pot. We then have to aggro this Joustmite and bring him close to this branch. If we then attack him at the right spot, he'll do the shake move and knock us right over the branch, which now gives us access to Alf's side of the river. And now that we're over here, we can just quickly go and grab the dodge whistle, which will be super important for the next part of the trick. And by super important, I mean we're literally using it next. We have to turn around, look at this wall, and use the dodge whistle to roll up on this ledge. Once up there, we have to carefully make our way around this little route. Then, we have to do the same thing we did earlier by holding our joystick at a very specific angle to clip into this route. Once we're halfway clipped in, we want to let go of the joystick so we pop out. This will put us on top of the route, which now allows us to walk straight over it. After walking over 2 more routes, we can walk past this gate and hit the loading zone, which happens to take us to this area where you normally fight Shaggy Longlegs. If we then take this tunnel, it'll take us back to the cave we started the day in, and more importantly, back to Brittany's side of the river. Because now that we have the dodge whistle, we have to get out of bounds again. If we come over to where this upside down pot is, we can get on top of it and walk on the outer rim. If we then angle ourselves in the right orientation, we can use the dodge whistle and roll out of bounds again. Then, we need to angle ourselves correctly in between these 2 leaves, use the dodge whistle, and roll over to the other ledge. Then, we have to walk in the out of bounds area until we reach the entrance of the cave you normally find yellow Pikmin in. We walk over it and then have to navigate our way through this maze of routes, which involves very carefully walking around this one and then clipping into this route just enough that we can walk through it. Then we have some more out of bounds walking to do until we reach this river, which we can just fall into and phase right into this wall. If we follow the wall along the length of the river, we will come to this gate that we walked by earlier. If we turn to the left and then walk straight forward from there, we will fall into the void, which will cause us to respawn right behind this bag. Then all we have to do is whistle our Pikmin and walk into the cave, which will somehow cause them to teleport to us. Then we can walk back outside the cave and just push this bag down, finally giving us access to the area's boss, the Fossbat. And honestly, this whole sequence wasn't that bad. It was kind of annoying getting this Joustmite to cooperate, and missing one of these dodge rolls or falling back into bounds was pretty easy. Oh, and I forgot to mention, while you're walking out of bounds, you can just hit the loading zone for the cave and screw up the whole thing, so yeah, maybe it was that bad. But either way, let's move on. So the reason we want to push down this bag is that it essentially gives us a shortcut to the Fossbat's cave. This is supposed to be the exit from the Fossbat cave, so by doing this, we are essentially entering it backwards, skipping the entire portion where you're supposed to break down this wall and fight through the first half of the cave. And unfortunately, there isn't enough time left to fight the boss, so we're gonna have to end the day and come back tomorrow. And you'll notice when we come back the next day, we're now Elf. Since Brittany escaped the cave with the yellow Pikmin, anytime we come back to the distant tundra now, we'll be playing as Elf. Which isn't a huge deal, but it does cause us one problem. Since we can't swap back to Brittany, we don't really have access to yellow Pikmin. since we haven't built the bridge and saved her yet, the yellows haven't merged with the onion. Which means those 20 yellows that we grew yesterday, we just don't have access to. And you kind of need yellows to beat the Phosbat. You're supposed to use them to light up his cave, which stuns him, allowing you to deal damage. And unfortunately, this is the only way you can hurt the Phosbat. Luckily, there are a few candy pop buds in his cave, so we can grow some yellows. But we can only grow 15 because this last bud is out of our reach. It requires a captain swap to be able to reach it, so we obviously can't use it. And this is significant because we need 20 yellows to light up the main light in the cave, which allows you to deal the final blow to the Phosbat. But we only have access to 2 of the lights, which isn't enough to kill him. The third one is on this ledge that needed the captain swap, and the fourth is the main light that requires 20 Pikmin that we just don't have enough for. So, is that it then? Are we just stuck? Stuck here, unable to damage the Phosbat? Well, no. If you watched my rock only run, then I'm sure you know what we're about to do. So, I kinda lied earlier. You can actually damage the Phosbat without stunning him with lights. If you throw rock Pikmin at his tail, it'll do a minuscule amount of damage. And I mean minuscule. It literally almost does nothing. But it does do something. And if we keep throwing rock Pikmin at his tail, we will slowly chip away at his health bar and kill him. Thankfully, I was able to deal some damage to him with the lights, so it didn't take that long killing him with just the rocks. Unlike in my rock only run, which took 3 full days to kill him. But yeah, now that we defeated the Phosbat and saved Charlie, the game just assumes that we saved Brittany as well. As you can see, at the end of the day, she joins us on the ship, and the yellow Pikmin merge with the onion. So, even though we didn't build the bridge or save Brittany, she's just here now. Not that we really need her because we can literally only use 1 captain, but either way, with our 3 captains reunited, we head off to the tropical wilds. So, before we start, let's quickly go over how you would normally get to the boss in the tropical wilds. Because it's actually kind of weird. You can ignore most of the level. You just have to complete a small portion of it to actually get to the boss. All you have to do is throw a captain and some Pikmin to the other side of this broken bridge and then swap to them. Once there, you can grab these pieces which will fix some of the bridge. You can then break down this wall and then find the rest of the pieces sitting on the top of this hill. Once the bridge is built, you need to bring all 3 captains back to the top of this hill. Then throw 2 captains and some Pikmin onto the stump, swap to one of them, and then throw some more Pikmin and 1 captain onto this ledge and swap one more time. You can then walk over and push this bag down, which gives you a shortcut to the boss arena. And that's it, you can now fight the boss. But obviously we can't do it this way. This involves 3 captain swaps and we just can't do that. But thankfully, there is something we can do. If we throw some Pikmin onto the broken bridge and then just walk into the river, we can whistle some of them and charge them at this wall. Now, we just have to get our Pikmin on those bridge pieces, which is the same situation we were in back on day 2. But unlike on day 2, we actually have the dodge whistle now. So getting those bridge pieces isn't a problem. All we have to do is bring our Pikmin over to this corner, use the dodge whistle a couple times, then dismiss them. If done correctly, they'll be close enough to the bridge pieces that they'll just start collecting them on their own. And then once our Pikmin are finished breaking down the sand wall, we can stand over here and whistle them. We can then walk to the other side of these rots, which will lead them on top of the hill. If we do the exact same thing as before and spam the dodge whistle, we can get our Pikmin close to the bridge pieces. If we then dismiss them again, they'll start collecting them and finish off the bridge. And while my Pikmin were up there, they actually killed some of these swarming shear grubs, which is actually incredibly lucky for us because we're going to need them for this upcoming trick. First, we have to push the body of the shear grub right over towards this ledge. And thankfully pushing in Pikmin 3 is a lot easier than pushing in Pikmin 1. We don't have to do any of this nonsense. We can literally just walk right into the shear grub and push it wherever we want. And once we have it where we want, we can use the dodge whistle and roll off the sheer grub like it's a ramp, getting us onto the stump without swapping captains. And luckily for us, there's just another sheer grub that spawns on the stump. And for some reason, this sheer grub's a bit tougher to push. You can't just walk into it, you have to get a running start, it's really weird. Which took me a bit to figure out, but once I did, I moved him to the edge of the stump. Now that it's there, we need to walk in between the sheer grub and the wall so we can clip up on this little ledge. We can then walk up this ramp onto this higher ledge, and if we angle ourselves correctly, we can use the dodge whistle and roll to the opposite side. Here, we can push down the bag, grab our Pikmin, and fight the boss. And there's really not a lot to say about the Mirror Slug either. We basically fight him like you normally would, because not being able to swap captains once again doesn't really change this fight at all. So we kick his butt, get the folded data glutton, and move on to the Twilight River. Now that we're in the Twilight River, our first goal is to get winged Pikmin. And to do that, you're normally supposed to find these 2 deposits of bridge pieces and bring them back to fix the bridge. Which we can totally do because you don't need to swap captains to do this. Or we could do a cool trick and skip this for no reason. I'm sorry, I just really love showing you guys cool tricks. If we come over here and throw our Pikmin up on this huge rock, then walk into the river near this lily pad, we can walk straight into the wall. And if we hold the joystick at a very specific angle, we can clip right through it. We then fall out of bounds and respawn on the other side of the river. If we then whistle the Pikmin that we threw on top of the rock earlier and keep whistling them, they will eventually make it to the lily pad. We can then use them to kill the spider and save the winged Pikmin. And again, this was completely unnecessary. We could have done this the normal way and been just fine. But hey, we pulled off Winged Onion early with no captain swaps, which I thought was pretty cool and wanted to show you guys, so there you go. Now that we have winged Pikmin, we can lift up this branch, releasing the lily pads, and ride them down to the second half of the level. Now that we're here, our goal is to build this massive bridge that leads to the boss, and there are 3 piles of bridge pieces we need to collect to do this. There's a pile across the river tucked away in this little nook, there's some under this clipboard that you need to break down a wall in order to access, and finally, there's some on top of this pillar, which you get by first riding the lily pad, then throwing some Pikmin and captains onto this mushroom, which then bounces them to the other side of the river. Once there, you just have to kill the spider and grab the bridge pieces. The first pile, we can just take some winged Pikmin and grab it normally. The second, you can totally just break down the wall and grab the pieces. Or, we can just throw our Pikmin up on this ledge and just walk up this area in between these 2 Brits. Which again, we totally don't need to do, but I thought it was cool, so I did it anyways. Now, the third pile is actually going to cause us a problem. Since we can't swap, we can't actually get up there with our winged Pikmin. And there aren't any other paths up there either. There's this path here that you can walk down, but you can't walk up it. So, we're kinda stuck. Thankfully, there's actually a very easy way around this. We actually don't even need to get up on that ledge. We can just walk right over towards the pillar with our winged Pikmin, charge them at it, and they'll just grab the pile. Which ends up being the last pile we need to complete the bridge. Which means we can now go and fight the boss. And once again, the boss is so uneventful that I'll just be skipping right over it. Just know that we kill him and save Louie, which means we can now head back to the Garden of Hope. And that night, Louie steals our food and escapes, and just so happens to blow a hole in this wall, which leads to the second half of the Garden of Hope. And the second half of the Garden of Hope is an area you're supposed to use blue and winged Pikmin to collect pieces of this bowl, which you can then use as a platform to throw your Pikmin and captains across, which gives you access to these bridge pieces so you can build the bridge that leads to the boss. But using this platform to throw our Pikmin and captains across isn't going to work because we have to swap in order to do this. But thankfully, we don't have to build this platform at all. If we walk into this corner, the winged Pikmin will slowly climb up the pail. Once they're over it, we can charge them at the bridge pieces and the mound of dirt. And once the winged Pikmin build up the bridge enough, we can just walk around and throw some rock Pikmin on the unfinished bridge. Then we can walk back into the water and charge the rock Pikmin at the crystal formation holding the last bridge pieces. And once that's done, the bridge will be built, giving us access to the boss without having to build a platform or swap captains at all. And now that we have access to the boss, we can just go and fight him. And once again, there's really not much to talk about. I kill the Mireclops like you normally would, we save Louie, and move on to the Formidable Oak. And honestly, the Formidable Oak is pretty easy. We can skip having to break down this wall by just throwing some yellow Pikmin up on this ledge, whistling them, and then charging them at the bag. They'll climb over it and push it down from the other side, giving us a shortcut to the central room. After some resistance from the Plasm Wraith, we manage to build a bridge and make it to the final area. And this final area is the only time you have to swap captains in the Formidable Oak. The whole point of this room is to activate 3 lights with your yellow Pikmin that will grow these flower bridges. You're supposed to light this one first, then build the bridge, walk across it, and light this one, which will in turn grow these flowers. Once you make it across the flowers, you will have to throw a captain and some Pikmin over this gap. Swap to the captain, connect the last light, and the flower bridge will be complete. But we basically don't have to do any of that. We can throw our yellow Pikmin in the water here, then walk across it and whistle them to the opposite shore. Once there, we can come to the gap where you're supposed to throw your Pikmin and captains across. We can then just throw our yellow Pikmin up on this ledge, walk around the other side, whistle them, and then once they're close, dismiss them. If done right, they will join hands and connect the wire, lighting the light bulb and growing some of the flower bridge. Once we complete the main bridge, we can walk over it and make our way across the flower bridge. But since we didn't light the other 2 light bulbs, it's not quite complete yet. But with a quick dodge roll, we can make it over the gap, completing this whole section without having to swap a captain once. And guys, that's pretty much it. We find the exit and beat the Plasm Wraith like normal. So overall, if you're doing the bare minimum, you need 10 captain swaps to beat the game. 1 to throw Brittany across the river to build this bridge in the Garden of Hope, 2 more in the Distant Tundra, 1 which is swapping from Brittany to Elf to throw rock Pikmin across this river, and then the other is swapping back to Brittany to finish building the bridge. 3 in the Tropical Wilds, 1 being throwing a captain and swapping to them to finish this bridge, and the other 2 are needed to cross over this stump. There's 1 in the Twilight River which requires you to throw a captain on this mushroom and then swap to them to get the bridge pieces. There's 2 more in the Garden of Hope that you need to use to cross this platform to get to the other side of the bridge. And then finally, there's this last one in the Formidable Oak, where you need to cross over this gap to light the final light bulb. Yeah, so we did all that just to save 10 swaps. Well, at least it was cool, right? So I'll continue the trend of ranking these challenge runs based on their difficulty. And I would say this one's about a 5 out of 10. The only day that actually gave me any trouble was day 4. Doing all these tricks to get Brittany across the river once and then back over again was annoying, but it probably only took me 4 or 5 times to nail it. So it really wasn't that bad. Maybe I still have PTSD from beating Paper Mario backwards and this just seemed easy in comparison? I don't know. But either way, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more Pikmin challenge runs, check out these.